Hi everybody, I'm Butch Stearns.
I'm Scott Liewehr.
And welcome to CMS-Connected, the web content management industry's only news commentary show. How you doing, Scott?
I am good, sir. Very good.
You're excited about this show, aren't you?
I'm really excited about this show. I look forward to this every year. I love it for two reasons. Number one, I really love web content management, so I love to talk about these particular vendors, and I do this every day. The other thing is I love bashing legacy analyst firms, right? So I don't mind, putting it to Gartner every once in a while and kind of talking about what the real world looks like versus their models.
All right, well, get ready, everyone, because we are talking about the 2014 Gartner Magic Quadrant for web content management, and that's what we're doing on this show. But before we begin, as always, I'd like to acknowledge our lead sponsors at CMS-Connected. They are Falcon Software, with locations across North America. Falcon Software, a full-service digital agency, has been providing web design, content management, e-commerce, social, mobile, and digital marketing solutions for over 21 years. And DCG, Digital Clarity Group, is a research and advisory firm focused on navigating organizations through the digital transformation process. And New Analyst Firm of the Year for 2014 by the IIAR. So, let's get right into it. You ready?
Let's do it.
All right, let's talk about web content management. Web content management products look so good on paper. They look so good on a glossy brochure, but oftentimes when you peel back the onion, when you do it, it just doesn't work on deployment. Why is that? Well, some of the reasons are that no one size fits all. It's really that simple. For all WCM platforms on the market, to provide the best solution for everyone's budget, for technical requirements, or business needs, you need to do your homework. For example, some may require a strong e-commerce or robust social media application. Others may require a system that excels in site globalization or mobile application features. Or you may need a CMS system that can seamlessly integrate with particular ERP or CRM solutions. So you really need to do your homework, Scott, don't you, when you're looking for a solution that fits your company, right?
You really do, and that is my general criticism of the quadrant. It is a great tool in terms of it being simplistic, that it provides people kind of an easy reference guide. The problem is that it's too easy. The problem is that it boils things down and makes it too easy. And why would I ever look at anything other than that upper right quadrant? And why would I not look at why would I look at anything even that's not on the quadrant, for example? So it makes it a little bit too easy. It's too simplistic in my view, and it can cause folks to make a lot of really bad decisions.
Yet it is the standard in the industry, isn't it?
Indeed it is. I mean, Gartner certainly, as a $2 billion company now, they own pretty much all CIOs, big companies all subscribe to Gartner. Their quadrants generally, but certainly specifically in the web content management market, it is the standard. Vendors scrap and fight to get on it, and they claw their way, hopefully to the top. For them, it means difference between millions of dollars of revenue for them and how many shortlists they make on, completely dependent on where they are in that quadrant.
All right, let's get into the 2014 Gartner Magic Quadrant for Web Content Management. It was released on October 9th, 2014. We're going to talk about the significance of it, what it means. We're going to talk specifically about the four quadrants and the leaders, the challengers, the visionaries, thank you, and the niche players. Yeah. So overall, a broad overview of it, we have no vendors being dropped, but two new vendors being added, Crown Peak and Telerik.
That's right.
Let's talk about the significance of the quadrant first, Scott.
Sure.
What is so significant about it? I think our audience understands. Why is it so significant, and what is so significant about Gartner's Magic Quadrant for web content management?
Again, I think, specifically, first of all, the web content management industry is changing significantly. The needs that are placed on, the requirements that folks have, that organizations have, and how they're using web content management systems vary vastly from one company to the next. A criticism that I have, frankly, is that so much now is looking through the marketer's lens about how can web content management aid in the form of digital marketing, but web content management is used for for intranets within an organization. There's an awful lot of uses for managing web content, right? So that's number one. Number two is so the industry is moving and shaping, and people look to the quadrant to set the standard for what's important for them. What are some important aspects matrix of vendor strategies to be able to make sure that they maintain, so that hopefully they set themselves up with purchases in the future that allow them to not have to be making, revisiting this decision soon. I think the idea here is frankly that folks don't monitor themselves these markets in detail. Gartner has many MQs, and they've got analysts specifically that focus on each one of these markets. And so a CIO who comes to go make a decision, or a CMO, whomever it is, that's coming to make a decision and make an acquisition of a web content management platform, quite an investment, doesn't want to have to know the market in depth. And so they count on and depend on analysts who cover the space exclusively to be able to tell them what's important, who are the movers and shakers, and who can they pin their hopes on long term would have a good vision that kind of carries them into the future.
I think it's great points. I mean, when you look at what's going on today with businesses, there's always been the silos. There's been marketing, sales, customer engagement now, e-commerce, customer service. But when it comes to the web content management industry, right, as you said, it's changing all the time. And so now as we look at the 2014 Gartner Magic Quadrant for web content management, it seems to me it's more important than ever, considering that those silos are all being broken down now.
Yeah, they really are. And I'd say one thing, if I didn't say it before, I think it's clear in what I said, which is that the MQ is used primarily to help folks make buying decisions, right? Number one. To your point, you're right. Web content management, the boundaries around it have expanded significantly. Now it includes sometimes marketing automation, now commerce even, customer communications, all sorts of things. And frankly, you usually see an awful lot more movement in the quadrant. We'll break down the axes, but you see an awful lot more movement horizontally, which means Gartner agrees or disagrees with the company's strategy, more so than their vertical movement, which would mean that they are shrinking in size or that sort of stuff in the market. There's typically not much vertical movement, an awful lot of horizontal movement. And that's for two reasons. Number one, the strategy of the vendors can change. Or number two, what Gartner thinks is good changes. And so suddenly the bar changes, and these guys either are aligned with it and therefore do well, or differ in opinion than Gartner does, in which case they won't do so.
All right, let's talk about how this is put together.
Yeah.
I mean, Gartner is the gold standard. It is the Magic Quadrant, but there is inclusion and exclusion criteria. Let's talk about how they do this, Scott. Inclusion and exclusion criteria. How do they rank these companies?
Yeah, so even before you rank, the inclusion criteria have to do with how they get into the quadrant in the first place, which is quite a leap. I mean, if you look at the MQ, there, as you said earlier, there are 19 in it this year. They list about another 40 or so that didn't even make the cut, right? So there are some inclusion criteria that before they even begin figuring out where to place them or how to evaluate their strategy, do they make the cut? Things that they look to about making the cut are, is their revenue at a certain level? It was at points in the past, it's been $10 million criteria. Now it's $14 million in 2013 revenue they need to have in order to make it into the 2014 MQ. They need to have sales across geographies, and at least some of the major geographies like North America, Europe, Asia Pac, that sort of thing. So those are a few of them. They need to have a sizable ecosystem, which basically means there's a community around them, a number of clients that are there, and frankly, that Gartner needs, and this is really key for many, because here's the challenge with the MQ, is that in the same way that we have an unlicensed version of their picture right there, that thing is floating all over the web. I mean, it's everywhere. No, we can show it because anybody can Google and go figure it out. And it's intentionally that way. Gartner can say, don't use this, but they very much want this thing to spread like wildfire. The problem with that is that their customer base tends to be Fortune 2000 companies, but the people who are looking at this particular thing are much smaller organizations that don't have these criteria, that don't have these needs, and frankly shouldn't be looking at a lot of these same products. And so you look at inclusion criteria like, one of them is, are the Gartner analysts being asked about this company a lot by their customers in their inquiries?
Well, that's the references, right?
Is the CIO calling up, is the analyst hearing questions on the phone? Because an analyst's job day to day is they take 3, 4, 5 inquiries any day from a CIO or whoever it is from an organization asking questions. Are they being asked about companies? If they're not being asked about them, that's actually a criteria for inclusion. Because that means there's interest in the market.
Yeah, a standalone product with a certain amount of functions.
Yeah.
Talk about that.
Yeah, so again, this varies from year to year, and this has to do with what are the feature function capabilities that Gartner says must be included to be defined as a web content management system. Things like that are super obvious are like workflow or WYSIWYG capabilities, which means what you see is what you get, so that you don't have to be you don't have to know HTML to go put that stuff in. So there are some basic set of maybe 19 or 20 of those sorts of criteria that you have to have in terms of features to be able to even make the cut.
You are watching CMS-Connected, the web content management industry's only news commentary show. We were talking about Gartner's Magic Quadrant for 2014 for the web content management industry. I'm Butch Stearns. Scott Liewehr of Digital Clarity Group is alongside. We're about to dive into each vendor and where they fit in Gartner's Magic Quadrant. We've talked about what it takes to be included, the criteria you need to be included or excluded in the quadrant. Let's talk about now how, once you get in, there's 19 companies in, 2 new ones, 17 repeats, how they start evaluating you. This is not the NFL playoffs. It's not win or lose. There's a lot of subjectivity here, yet Gartner works very hard to have criteria to evaluate them, don't they?
They do. They've tried to make what is a fairly subjective process as objective as possible, right? By breaking it down into parts and pieces and saying, if overall, it's basically what I think of you. But let me just categorize how I might think of you in what ways, and I'll rank you, and you know, and I'll evaluate you. And the challenge with Gartner in the past has been that they're not super transparent about that. You can't actually see how did they give you a 1 to 5 rating or whatever in each one of these things. So there is an awful lot of magic in this, but ultimately they try to at least tell you basically the areas to look at.
And they break it down into 2 areas: ability to execute and completeness of vision, right?
That's right. So ability to execute is that vertical axis. So this is a 2x2, right? As analysts love to create plot graphs. So ability to execute is the vertical axis, and that is looking at things like their pricing, their market penetration, their size. Again, this is where I said most folks don't necessarily move up and down so often. I mean, how much more ability to execute does Oracle have from year to year? Not necessarily. Okay, not necessarily very much, rather. Some small companies at the bottom of the quadrant, the bottom half, those tend to be the smaller companies or those with less market presence. You might see a lot more movement there. And especially as a company gets acquired, a smaller company gets acquired, you'll see them make the leap up, you know, as the up to the top or something like that.
So again, ability to execute under evaluation criteria for this quadrant, these companies all have it. They're ranking how good they are at it.
Yeah. Exactly.
The vertical part of it.
And not just how good they are at it, but they give them, you know, again, like, so if market presence is one of them, how large is their market presence? If pricing is one of them, how expensive are they? If you know, the strength of the size of their sales force is, you know, 2,000 people versus is it, you know, 10 people, certainly they're going to have a higher ability to execute the more that you've got of any of those things.
All right, so completeness of vision. You mentioned off the top that in their evaluation criteria, they're trying to come up with an objective way to take a lot of subjectivity and make it objective, right?
Yes, that's right.
Well, when it comes to completeness of vision, is it harder to do it than it is with ability to execute?
I mean, well, I would say...
And this is the horizontal.
You know, I would say obviously, but not obviously because of, you know, it's a silly question, but obviously because if you look at the movement in the quadrant from year to year, and they always want to give the caveat, Gartner does, that, oh, you shouldn't, you know, it's not a comparable, you shouldn't look at last year and look at the current year and then compare them. And of course that's what everyone does, but if you look just a couple of years ago, SDL as an example was way far into the right, where they just loved their vision, and now they've fallen way off, and they're on the left side of that vertical hash. So obviously something's happening. Either Gartner's changing what it thinks about what is a complete vision, or the vendor's vision itself and strategy has really deteriorated. So that's what is really included in there in terms of completeness of vision. That it really is, it's all about strategy, your sales strategy, your marketing strategy, your product strategy, and how that matches up against what Gartner thinks is good.
You're watching CMS Connected. Butch Stearns, Scott Liewehr. We're talking about Gartner's Magic Quadrant for 2014 for the web content management industry. And we're about to dive now into the different quadrants of it, and we're about to review the vendors. You ready, Scott?
I'm ready, man.
All right, let's start in the upper right with the leaders. These are the companies that, according to Gartner, have the highest combined scores on ability to execute and completeness of vision. They're doing well. They're prepared for the future with a clear vision and a thorough appreciation of the broader context of digital business, according to Gartner.
Yes.
So what's important to know about the leaders part of the quadrant?
Yeah, so first of all, the impact on the vendors is gigantic. For someone to make it, this is the holy grail. This is what everyone wants. Forget even the Forrester wave, which is Forrester's equivalent of the MQ. Forget everything. If you can make it into Gartner's leader quadrant in the WCM MQ, those vendors get rewarded big time with short listings and with attention and, frankly, money. There are some in there who I'll give caveats to that, but for the most part, this is a really big deal to be in it. And I think there are more notable shifts, I think, this year than there have been in the past.
Okay, so let's get into that. Six companies in the leaders quadrant: Sitecore, Adobe, HP, Oracle, IBM, and Acquia.
Yeah.
Acquia is new to this quadrant.
It is.
Sitecore and Adobe are at the top, and that's for a reason, right?
Yeah, I think I don't think many would disagree with certainly at least those in the industry who are out in the market looking at both the strategy of Adobe and of Sitecore, their products, their market penetration, their marketing, everything. I think they're fairly undisputed leaders. Their partner base is everything. Notably new this year, though, like you mentioned, is Acquia coming in, really gigantic. I mentioned earlier that there aren't many who make that north-south leap, and they did. So they came up from the visionary quadrant into the leader quadrant. And then another one that is really notable for me, frankly the most notable, is that IBM moved over from the challenger quadrant, which is the upper left, over for the first time since 2008. Moved over into the leaders quadrant. So suddenly they're seeing eye to eye with Mick and the.
So let's sort of give your analysis of each company and why they're here.
Sure,
Want
let's
to
do
that?
Yeah.
All right,
absolutely.
we're talking about the 2014 Gartner Magic Quadrant for web content management. We're talking about the leaders quadrant, and we're going to talk about Sitecore first, Scott Liewehr. Why do they deserve to be here?
So this is a company, Sitecore, in which. First of all, they had a different kind of a year for them. Sitecore had been known. They were, first of all, they were in the mid-market before. It's a .NET platform. Everybody knows they were kind of a suite. It was an all-in-one package. They had brought all these capabilities to the table. They had natively built every part of their platform, typically from the ground up, as opposed to an acquisition strategy like most. This year for them, though, was notable for me in that they made a fairly sizable acquisition of Commerce Server, which was Microsoft's old commerce platform. For me, I think that's why if you look at them on the left to right scale, on that vision scale, they are a little further to the right, so they are seen by Gartner as the most visionary. And I think it's probably because of that commerce acquisition where Adobe notably misses that mark. And they have a ton of market penetration, they do. And they've got a really large partner base. To me, the partner base holds them back a little bit because while the product can really be evolutionary for a company, most of their partner base, frankly, is made up of systems integrators more so than kind of agencies who might do a little bit more of the, at the outset of what you said is it kind of all comes down to how is this implemented. And ultimately, you can have great implementation, certainly of Sitecore like anything else, but it's got to really align with your strategy and with your vision. And most of Sitecore's partner base tend to be just integrators, and so therefore you can find a disconnect sometimes between the implementation and the strategy of the organization because it's not driven by one firm.
Let's go back to your comment on Sitecore about them being the most visionary. You mentioned that mostly because of the commerce platform that they added, right?
Yeah, sure.
Talk a little bit more about that.
Sure. And we spent some time talking about this earlier in the year too. I mean, I think First of all, again, we talked about the boundaries around web content management changing, and where last year in 2014, 2013 even, we saw a big run on marketing automation vendors. I think we're now, as we predicted earlier, starting to see a run on commerce vendors. And so Sitecore they were one of the kind of first to make this run on them, where they bought Commerce Server. And I think in Gartner's mind about kind of where the future of the web, digital experiences and things are going, certainly commerce plays a really big role in that. And so I believe that helped them score fairly highly. Where they're going to get dinged a little bit by Gartner is Gartner's, frankly, love recently of customer communications management, and I tend to disagree with that, just that it needs to be part of their vision, but that's where an Adobe is able to keep pace with them, is because they've got that kind of more in hand. So they're neck and neck.
Final comment about Sitecore, at the top of the food chain, so to speak, in the leaders category of Gartner's Magic Quadrant. They've been here before, they've been here for a while. What do they need to do to stay here?
So I basically, I'll give an agree, disagree with placement. I basically agree with their placement here. I think that we will probably see, I mentioned that Commerce Server is one of their first larger acquisitions. I imagine that we'll see more acquisitions from them, especially because they took in funding a couple of years ago, and they need to put that to good use. I also expect, this has been talked about for a long time, for them to be preparing for an IPO. I doubt it'll happen in 2015, but I'd imagine we'll hear a lot of buzz about it. So I think they'll probably be making more acquisitions or feel forced to make more acquisitions. I think what they also need to do is really expand. Their product today is fairly light in capabilities, but wide breadth of capabilities. So light in terms of depth, wide breadth. And if you really want to be impactful in the enterprise, you need to have more depth if you're expecting folks to do away with their marketing automation platform and use your all-in-one suite. You've got to have more depth than they have today. So I expect them to do more of that.
In this edition of CMS-Connected, we're talking about Gartner's Magic Quadrant for 2014 for the web content management industry, and we're talking about the leaders part of the quadrant right now. We talked about Sitecore, time to talk about Adobe right now. Again, Adobe sort of, with Sitecore, in a class a little above everybody else, huh?
Yeah, I think notably, we talked about Sitecore first, but I think Adobe is probably the heralded by most leader. They are in probably the most net new deals, at least with larger enterprises, certainly. They've got what I would call the nicest partner ecosystem of kind of the fairly highly coveted digital agencies that are out there, the MRMs and the Razorfishes and all of that. They've also got what is becoming they've got a large ecosystem of partners that have actually built their own white label solutions on them. So you've had Sapient go all in and build a platform called Engage Now on them. Razorfish build their own called Fluent, number one. And more came out this last year. I think another 4 launched. So not only are they selling direct, but now through their partner ecosystem. So they're really getting a lot of market traction. And so I think they deserve to be at the top for that reason.
A little more about their partner ecosystem. Why is it an advantage for them, in your opinion, over Sitecore, and how does Gartner view that, do you think?
Yeah, certainly it's an advantage for them because they get pulled into an awful lot more deals, and their name gets associated with the likes of a very coveted digital agency's name. So oftentimes, especially where they try to cater to marketers, I mentioned I think we've swung a little too far over to the marketing area, but let's talk about, since we're there, let's talk about that. Adobe very notably owns the CMO of all these vendors. They're the ones that are kind of most, they have all the creative suites and products that marketers tend to use and creative types tend to use and branders tend to use. So they appeal most to them, and they are really doubling down on that in a really big way by then also making inroads with all of these agencies to go penetrate their accounts. And so I think it's huge and it's helped them a lot. I think the challenge that they have is that because they are the flavor of the day, or at least the last couple of years, certainly if you look at the legacy firms, they are put into an awful lot of situations where they're acquired bought by companies that probably shouldn't be buying them. that don't really have the needs that align well with what their capabilities are. Smaller companies that way have to overspend, them dropping their price significantly to be able to continue to make more deals because they don't want somebody like Sitecore nipping at their heels, so they'll make sure not to lose to them and they'll lower their price or something like that. But that ends up hurting them in the long run because the implementation cost is still the same. If you've got $1.5 million implementation, let's say that if you're, $500,000 license price, well, that means that you're probably going to spend $1.5 million to $2 million on an implementation. If I drop that 500,000 to 250 to be more comparable to a Sitecore, well, I still have $1.5 million to $2 million of implementation. So you really didn't lower the overall cost of ownership, you just lowered the license. And so it gets quickly over the heads of many who want to have that flavor of the day, want to be able to say, well, I chose the leader. And I think they get into a lot of hot water for that.
So Scott, for Adobe, what's the future for them?
Yeah, I think for them the most immediate future is that they have made traction in the commerce part of the market. So I think commerce is a big part of now the digital marketing suite generally. And they've made a lot of traction only because of their relationship with Hybris. I think though, however, that those two companies tend to be going in different directions. Hybris looking to have the capabilities that Adobe actually has and wanting to compete with them more directly with that. And I think that Adobe only cares about Hybris as long as they need them. You see an Elastic Path, which is another commerce platform out there that's really angling itself to be a much, a part of the Adobe suite. They only work with them, and we see in the field the Adobe salespeople pushing Elastic Path a lot more than we've seen them pushing Hybris of late. So I wouldn't doubt if we see them down the road picking up a commerce platform, quite specifically, maybe even an Elastic Path, once they're kind of done with the Hybris, once they've taken the Hybris relationship as long as they can.
Let's talk about HP now. In this edition of CMS-Connected, we're talking about the Magic Quadrant, Gartner's Magic Quadrant for 2014 for the web content management industry. I'm Butch Stearns of the Pulse Network, Scott Liewehr of Digital Clarity Group alongside. When we talk about HP in the leaders part of the Magic Quadrant, they deserve to be here, don't they?
Well,
Gartner says they do.
That. Gartner has said that for a long time. I mean, I'll be honest with you. I think in the industry, folks have always wondered why HP didn't slide further. Interwoven was a product that was bought by Autonomy. Gosh, maybe it was in 2009 or 2008. The product really didn't change much at all by Autonomy. Then Autonomy ended up selling it to HP in, I think, 2011. We still saw no change, and it was very obvious in the news about HP's distaste for the Autonomy acquisition. That was in the news and lawsuits and all sorts of stuff. So it sat there, didn't make use of any of the capabilities of IDLE that Autonomy had, its famous search product, or of any of HP's capabilities, yet it hasn't really fallen much at all. And maybe that's because of the presence that they had. Interwoven was at one point a very popular product and within many of the large enterprises, but I'll tell you what, they're not in any short list that I see. They're being replaced more than not. I do like their strategy of late, I will say. I don't want to only bash them. I do like some of the things that I'm hearing. Well, sure. So they're starting to integrate more with IDLE. I've always thought for a long time that web content management and search should come together more seamlessly, so they're starting to do that. Gartner here gives them credit that that basically LiveSite, which is the personalization and dynamic content capabilities, has nicely come together with TeamSite, which was the web content management capabilities. Well, it's about time. The two of them were both Interwoven products from 6 years ago. I'm so glad that they're working together now. And again, they also talk about it working, well with, some of the what's the product they call it, Xstream, which is HP's, customer communications management. I mentioned that they've got kind of a thing for that this year. Look, I don't know. They're shifting the goalposts, but for whatever reason, HP always stays there front and center, and I really haven't gotten it.
So, in your opinion, is HP in the leaders quadrant, according to Gartner, partly because of reputation?
100% because of reputation. Well, actually, the reputation is bad. The reputation is bad. HP just has a big, gigantic install base.
Legacy. I mean, the
Yes.
fact that it's HP,
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
a storied brand,
Absolutely.
and all this and that. Yet, you're willing to give them credit that they are doing some innovative things.
I'm willing to
still.
give them some credit for some of the really, really recently innovative stuff. But this product hasn't changed in a long time, and it was the redheaded stepchild within autonomy, much less within HP, and it got no love from the product teams whatsoever. I mean, whatsoever. So I'm shocked. I'm not shocked because this has been year over year the story. But in the industry, this is the kind of the laughing story underneath it all. It's kind of like that it won't move. But it should be over there with, you know, not as far over as maybe as Microsoft, but it should be a challenger.
All right, Scott Liewehr of Digital Clarity Group. Let's talk about Oracle as we talk about the leaders part of the Magic Quadrant for 2014 for WCM. When we talk about Oracle, again, you think of Oracle, it's a legacy brand. Why do they deserve, or why does Gartner believe that they deserve to be in the leaders part of the Magic Quadrant?
So Oracle, I think they do one thing well, which is use their pocketbook. They do spend well. I mean, they've made some great acquisitions. Oracle has acquired, not only did they acquire FatWire, which was near the top of its game. FatWire is basically what Web Center Sites is built on. So the web content management project that we're talking about here, that they're evaluating, is the old FatWire product. They acquired it, I think, in 2012, 2011. But they've made really great acquisitions. So they bought Eloqua, which was, you know, one of the top marketing automation platforms, bar none. They bought Endeca, which was one of the best kind of search / personalization / retailing capabilities for a long time. ATG, which is coming back, I think, around, was always one of the best commerce kind of platforms, and now is really coming into strength again. But the challenge has always been for Oracle, and I've said this before kind of jokingly, but kind of serious, tongue-in-cheek, is you go to Oracle to die. Products go to Oracle to die, which is basically they would get acquired, sit over there, and then they would sit on them, they would not pull. Oracle, like an HP, and frankly like an IBM as well, which we'll talk about soon, is starting to actually make some strides pulling those products together for the first time. I mean, really, I think FatWire hasn't had any attention by Oracle in a really long time, and only finally now with this next release is it getting, you know, it's reskinned and it looks nice and it's working well with some of the other products, and I think that's what has done it well. But again, they haven't moved from year to year out of the leaders quadrant in a long time. So that they're here, I think maybe, yeah, they finally deserve to be here, but they shouldn't have been of
So
late.
my interpretation on your review of Oracle in the leaders quadrant, or the leaders portion of the Magic Quadrant, is that, again, these are the companies that have the highest combined scores on ability to execute and completeness of vision. So if I had to simplify what you just said about Oracle, high marks on completeness of vision with their acquisitions and the companies they're acquiring. Are they weak on ability to execute, is what you're saying?
No, actually the opposite of what you're saying there. So they're never going
not
to
listening
drop.
then.
They're never going to drop an ability to execute. Oracle's huge. They've got a gigantic sales base of people. They've got huge marketing dollars. They can, so their ability, so if they were to go buy, when they bought FatWire, which is a fairly small company right around the corner from me in Mineola, New York. They can buy that very small company and go, you know what, we'll put this in the hands of all of our sales guys and we'll push it out there to all the companies that happen to have Oracle installed, and we'll go push it ever. And that's what they've done, basically. They're not getting net new logos. They're going and selling it into an existing Oracle client base. That's why ability to execute is still very high for them. Okay, it is the completeness of vision. Have they pulled it together to work with their other products and platforms? Do they have a vision about how they see FatWire becoming a real base for their digital marketing plans in the future? It's the vision that I think that they've struggled with in the past, and they should only now start to be creeping over. But quite frankly, I'm even giving credit for something that's not even yet out, which is the newest version of the product. Up to this point, it's been lacking.
All right, there isn't a larger legacy brand than IBM. And as we sit here talking about the 2014 Gartner Magic Quadrant for the web content management industry on this edition of CMS-Connected, when we talk about IBM, they're in the leaders part of the quadrant.
Yes.
Why?
So I actually think I'm going to agree with Gartner on this one. I'm glad they moved them over from the challengers quadrant in the upper left to the leaders quadrant in the upper right. I really like how they've started to pull their vision together on a couple of fronts. Number one, Certainly product-wise, again, they had some good products, but they hadn't done a very good job pulling them together. They had, WebSphere Portal, which is a big fat portal product that they needed to use. They had a web content management package, but they've created this ability now that's kind of this pre-packaged, what they call WCM Now, which is this pre-packaged, templatized capability so that it's kind of quicker to roll out. They also have, just IBM as a whole has announced last year 5,000 more headcount hires in their IBM Global Services. So when you talk about this stuff, again, as you mentioned at the top of the show, so much of this, I think, is dependent on the partner base and their ability to go and implement any of these products to do what it is the clients think that they're buying. Certainly, IBM having a gigantic professional services and actually agency. They have a very well-esteemed agency now as a part of them, digital marketing agency as a part of them. For them to know and have a product that they are going to know fluently well and be able to implement well and have all the possible integrations into big data that they've got within an organization. Think about what all is running on IBM. There's an awful lot to tap into there. And finally, that strategy is coming together with an ecosystem of a partner in IGS that can now really be able to kind of put fuel on that fire and get it moving.
All right, again, one more comment about IBM, why they deserve to be here, why Gartner has them as a leader in their Magic Quadrant for WCM.
Yeah, again, they're not in probably a lot of net new deals. IBM is, again, tapping into much of its client base, but I think they deserve to be, they call it DXD, Digital Experience Delivery or something like that, is what the WCM falls in as a part of. That vision that they developed, that was basically in the end of, I think, 2013, I think is good. It warrants, I think the product is on a good path. I'll be down in Orlando in just a couple of weeks to go hear even more about this, where they give their annual kickoff, and we'll report back to you there. But I do like their vision. They are pulling products together. They've done a lot with their services base, and I think that they're getting rightfully good attention.
All right, the sixth company of our 6 leaders in the 2014 Gartner Magic Quadrant for WCM, as we're discussing here on this edition of CMS Connected, is a newcomer. It's Acquia, local company here, Massachusetts, always been visionary, but now they're being considered by Gartner to be a leader when it comes to ability to execute and their completeness of vision.
Yeah.
Do they deserve to be here? Gartner says yes.
This is, I think it's a little tough for me to answer. So I would say yes, they deserve to be a leader. Generally I do think that they're a leader. Because why? And I think this is why they probably got more credit. They don't have the revenue, I mean, as close as they are to some of the other ones that we've just talked about, they don't have anywhere close to the revenue there. But that's why it's not the only part of that criteria. Certainly they are in the mouths of many people. Acquia has done a really great job getting their message out. They're being asked about, in nearly every deal that I'm in, we talk about them. Oftentimes they don't make the short list, though, I will tell you. But I know, especially since Gartner's base, more than a Forrester who tends to cater to marketers and CMOs, Gartner tends to cater to the IT organizations, especially because Acquia is an open source product. It is on the mouths of many IT folks. They want to understand about it. And so I think it makes it into the leaders quadrant because it's being asked about an awful lot in inquiries and things. And so, yeah, I agree that it should be up there. In terms of features and functions and capabilities, though, it's fairly far behind, many of the others that we're talking about. I mean, it's not nearly as kind of enterprise ready or as sophisticated as many. It's an open source project that has, a new version. It's based on, Drupal 7 right now, 7 something. But Drupal 8's been coming out. Drupal 8's been being worked on for 4 years, and is only in beta right now. And so they're undergoing a big, massive shift where Drupal 8 is I think something like 70 to 80% of the code base is changing in it. So it's going to be a massive shift that many Acquia customers and Drupal customers in general need to go about when they do the upgrade. So I think that's a big kind of both a great thing for them. They're looking forward to an awful lot of new features and capabilities that are going to be coming on the next version. But it's also a real challenge for them in that anybody that buys them right now, frankly, is faced with a fairly large upgrade in the very near future. Yeah.
Okay, you ready to move from the upper right to the upper left?
Yeah, I just say one more thing about Acquia. I think the one more thing there is that they counter to other open source products, they have an awful lot. There's Acquia and there's Drupal, and they're very different things here. They're often pegged in the same hole, and I think they have made a big, and the reason I think they get a lot of credit here is because they were a services company around Drupal before. Now they are shifting to becoming a product company. So they've made an acquisition this year of a personalization tool. They've launched their Acquia Cloud Site Factory. They've done a number of things that really pit them as, that's I think another thing that probably gets them high visionary marks and also high ability to execute marks.
This is CMS-Connected. I'm Butch Stearns. He's Scott Liewehr of Digital Clarity Group. It is the web content management industry's only news commentary show, and on this edition, we're talking about the 2014 Gartner Magic Quadrant for web content management. We've already talked about the leaders. Time now to talk about the challengers in the upper left of that quadrant. Scott, we only have 3 companies here: SDL, Microsoft, and OpenText. Let's take a step back before we talk about each individual vendor, and let's talk about the challengers. When we talk about the leaders, we're talking about the highest combined scores, the companies that should drive market transformation according to Gartner. The one word that Gartner says about the challengers that sticks out with me: solid. These are the solid companies. Are these your offensive and defensive linemen? Is this what we're talking about?
Yeah, they are, but I think when you look at them, though, the devil's in the details. So the point is that you make it north-south in the quadrant by just being big, and we'll talk about Microsoft specifically, where I'll pick on them. But these companies tend to be larger, but not necessarily good, have a good vision, any of those things. And I think what we see this year from last year is we saw IBM, as we talked about, left this quadrant and went over to the leader quadrant. We also, and I think that was the only one that moved out, but we've seen 2 move in. We saw SDL slide from the leaders quadrant last year into the challenger quadrant this year, and we also saw OpenText slide left. Microsoft sits where they've always sat, which I'll tell you a little bit about that in a second. But I think generally, these are big, large companies. Whether or not they're actually challenging for anything, I don't know. Challenging for what? Challenging why? They have a poor strategy, so how are they challenging? They're just big.
Well, they're challenging to become leaders, according to Gartner.
Maybe, sure. It's the devil's in the details.
That's what you want
Let's
to talk
about. Yeah, exactly.
All right, so let's talk about SDL here on this edition of CMS Connected as we discuss the 2014 Gartner Magic Quadrant for web content management. And when we talk about SDL, they're in the upper left. They're in the challengers category. What do we need to know about SDL? Why are they in the challengers category?
Yeah, so they've probably made the biggest slide year over year, not just last year to this year, but even in the previous couple of years. I mean, SDL at one point was Gartner's most visionary group. I'm sure, here's, by the way, another look, here's a funny thing about this whole thing. It's fairly easy. It's north-south you can be fairly objective about that. You got so much sales, so much marketing dollars spent, et cetera. It's only east-west on this thing that Gartner is really giving, whether they're saying that you're good or bad. And so frankly, in the same way that you can see people progress, I think it's also a negative on Gartner if you see so many of these guys slide. I mean, I feel for a company that just bought SDL 2 years ago, literally when they were furthest to the right, most visionary, which is Gartner's prediction for how they're going to be down the road, right? Completeness of vision is basically ability to execute is how you are now. Completeness of vision is how you're going to be in the future. Gartner's so wrong here in this. They just a couple of years ago, they had you as the most visionary, now they suddenly slide you so far left. I'm sure those CROs are really happy with Gartner for that prediction. But anyway, I think they rightly have slid. And it's kind of a sad state because they were one of the leaders. They made a lot of acquisition of products. I think, unfortunately, they didn't combine those products very well. They have reskinned it, though. It's nice. They've kind of put it in the cloud, and they've come with this whole CEC, this cloud experience, customer experience cloud. But really, where SDL has been challenged is that they are not getting on short lists, and part of that is because of just their sales organization was frankly horrid. For a couple of years. Their marketing was all over the place as they were not a unified kind of organization. They were an organization of divisions, and each division was a previous product company that they had acquired. And so each headed by a CEO. And so therefore they ran in all different directions. People only sold one product. There was not a cohesive thing. And when I'm a customer now trying to buy this vision from you about all these things, and you have to bring 6 different salespeople into me to go and sell to me, that's a real problem. The good thing is they've changed that in the last year, but we're basically seeing them slowing down in the market because of the internal introspection they're taking to try to reorganize themselves and position themselves. I really think that it wouldn't surprise me if they were the target of an acquisition, because solid product, solid capabilities, but I think they've had to bring a CEO back in who had left and brought him back in. Management at the top, I don't know if they're there for the very long haul. I wouldn't doubt if they're out there courting buyers and if they aren't the target of an acquisition, maybe even by a Microsoft in the not so distant future.
Move on to Microsoft.
No inside information on that whatsoever, by the way. Yes, please, let's do it.
All right, let's talk about Microsoft here when we discuss the 2014 Gartner Magic Quadrant for Web Content Management. You are watching CMS-Connected, Butch Stearns, Scott Liewehr. We're talking about the challengers in the Magic Quadrant, the upper left in the MQ, 3 companies, STL, Microsoft, and OpenText. Microsoft.
Yep.
Why are they here in the challengers? Why aren't they a leader?
Why are they on this Web Content Management MQ in the first place? No, truthfully. I mean, really, really, really. I'm actually not even joking. For years, as an analyst oftentimes who's out there shortlisting companies, I always had, we would tell our customers, we'll bring you a short list of 3. And oftentimes I had to make an exception and allow a 4th to be SharePoint because they have such a huge install base, and every CIO wanted us to show them, they wanted to, why not? Why can't we use SharePoint to do our web content management? And I would have to make as convincing of argument as I could about why it's horrid for web content management. Well, now, however, because they were being sold a bill of goods at the time by the Microsoft salesperson, now Microsoft has done a 180 on that. They don't even try to sell it as a web content management platform anymore. They're not even trying to get in those deals. And in fact, their Dynamics product, which is their CRM and a number of other commerce products, they've actually positioned themselves with Sitecore to do web content management. They don't even try to take it on themselves, really, at all. It's pretty admitted by them. They've done everything but outrightly come out and say that. They're not trying to sell it. So therefore, we're not being asked by that by CIOs all the time because they're not planting that in their ears. And I really honestly don't even know why they're on this quadrant, other than maybe that some of the CIOs out there are still such laggards that they actually are using SharePoint for web content management. But implementation-wise, it's going to cost you, literally, we give a rule of thumb, anywhere from 3 to 5 times license cost, assuming that it's not open source, to do an implementation. It's 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 for SharePoint. All the work that you have to do to get this thing to work like anyone else that we're talking about on this thing. So gigantic install base, so it deserves north-south cred, I guess, but I would put it all the way on the farthest left axis that I possibly could for vision because they're not even trying to be a web content management platform.
All right, let's talk about OpenText, Canadian-based company. We're here on this edition of CMS-Connected, the web content management industry's only news commentary show. And we're talking about the 2014 Gartner Magic Quadrant. We've talked about the leaders, the 6 companies up there. We're now talking about the 3 challengers, the solid vendors that can perform well for many different enterprises. The questions about the challengers compared to the leaders are whether they have the vision to succeed tomorrow. What's significant about OpenText being listed in the MQ in the challengers category?
Yeah. I don't understand the slide. Well, let's say this. I understand their position now, and I would say that I agree with it. I just don't understand the slide from last year to this year because I didn't agree with it last year, I guess, being a leader. Look, I like what OpenText sometimes tries to do, but the problem is that they change so often. At one point, we talked about them having hired Kevin Cochran, who's a notable person in this industry, to be their CMO. They were going to figure out how to find, OpenText historically has catered way more to financial analysts than to industry analysts. They just acquired products and much like an Oracle, just would sit on them. They'd buy them at a certain phase in their cycle, milk them for revenues, for maintenance revenues, and that was pretty explicit by them. They came out and said that. At some point, though, they talked about this notion, though, of CEM, Customer Experience Management, when Kevin was aboard. And they were going to pull all this stuff together, which I think was the right story to go and tell, because they're sitting there, they have many parts and pieces, a lot of ECM products in there, search products in there. They've got a lot of information that's sitting inside an organization that they're managing. And to be able to say, look, at customer experience management-wise, we can help pull all this together for you. That was a really good story. I think started to resonate okay. But then they didn't see the sales equivalent, and they dropped right back to their old habits and said, forget all that. We're back to web engagement management or web experience management. They don't care about really the CEM story as much anymore. I do, however, like, so this is the WEM product is the old Vignette, which is a legacy product. It's been around forever. They finally dropped the name a couple of years ago. I think that they don't get enough credit by, they get smirks and stuff in the industry, I think, when you talk about OpenText right now as a web content management product. But I think it's actually, frankly, fairly good. I think they've really, it's a nice decoupled product that they've put a really nice skin on. I think it looks great. I like the way that it works. I don't think it's well integrated necessarily with the rest of their stack, but talk about, they've got a digital asset management product that many are out there coveting in Artesia that's one of the best, on the market today, bar none. They're notably missing marketing automation and notably missing analytics and a couple of things like that, but I think as a WCM product, it's actually decent. I just don't necessarily understand the slide from year to year. I agree with the placement, but I just don't understand the slide.
So final comment about OpenText. I mean, many companies shift the way they sell, how they're viewed in the industry. I think that happened to OpenText recently. Do they need a better product strategy when it comes to them as a WCM?
Yeah, they need to figure out who they are. Right now, Mark Barenshay's, all of this, that's their CEO. His baby is EIM, Enterprise Information Management. And that's old and stodgy, and that's, all about ECM, which people are even talking about, kill that category. And he's still hanging on to it. And so that tends to appeal to CIOs then more than anyone. And that's fine if you're going to go appeal to them like they were with the CEM story. Go talk to strategic CIOs and talk to them how they can position all this together. But to abandon that then and say, I want to go compete against Adobe with marketers and try to win them over when you've got this EIM story that doesn't appeal to a marketer at all, it's just mass confusion, doesn't work well, they don't appeal to anybody. They're not in many net new deals, although they notably won, I think, like Ralph Lauren this last year because of their damn Artesia product. But yeah.
Finally for OpenText, what's next for them?
Yeah, so I think, OpenText gets a lot of benefit from their relationship with others. One of them, most notably, is a relationship with SAP. I mentioned earlier when we were talking about Adobe that Hybris and Adobe are starting to go a different direction. Well, Hybris being acquired by SAP not so long ago is actually starting to play with OpenText more. I think OpenText could really gain, the web platform specifically, could really gain by being associated with Hybris and SAP as they continue to pursue that, and them not really having a strong, solid WCM foundation. I could see that relationship not only just increasing partner-wise, potentially even more down the road than that, but I think that we definitely see them aligning themselves a lot more closely with an SAP.
Time for us to take a break here on this edition of CMS Connected. We're talking about the 2014 Gartner Magic Quadrant for the web content management industry. Scott Liewehr of Digital Clarity Group, Butch Stearns of the Pulse Network. We've talked about our leaders. We've talked about our challengers. After the break, we will talk about the visionaries and the niche players and wrap up this edition of CMS Connected. So get connected.
Stay connected.
On CMS Connected. We'll be right back.
The music, the laughter, the cheer. It's the most wonderful time of the year. Except for these guys. This is your web team. They're wrung out, they're frazzled, and they're scared. Scared they won't get the new product content out to your customers in time. Scared your competition will get to them first. Scared the slightest delay will mean lost revenue and, worse yet, their jobs. There are no visions of sugar plums dancing in their heads. They're drowning in data and systems. They're trying to pull content and information together from every nook and cranny. From technologies like Demandware, Salesforce, SAP, IBM, LifeRay, Brightcove, and even in-house proprietary applications nobody's ever heard of. What's worse? That content needs to be posted to your online storefront, to your company's website, in campaign emails, on mobile devices, customer service portals, and across social media. And it has to be personalized at every touch point of the customer journey. Right now, the clock is ticking. The competition is looming. But it doesn't have to be this hard. Enjoy the music, enjoy the laughter, enjoy the cheer. and enjoy the revenue. With a content management solution that easily integrates with all your systems so that everyone can enjoy the most wonderful time of the year and every day after that. eSpirit, playing now at a website, portal, and online storefront near you.
Welcome back to CMS-Connected, the web content management industry's only news commentary show.
The award-winning.
What awards did we win?
I don't know.
We gave them to ourselves. Anyway.
Exactly.
I'm Butch Stearns of the Pulse Network.
And I am Scott Liewehr from Digital Clarity Group.
And we're here talking about the 2014 Gartner Magic Quadrant
Yes, sir.
for web content management. We've already discussed leaders.
Yes.
We've already discussed challengers. We're moving on to visionaries and niche players. We're moving on to the bottom half of the quadrant, correct?
Yes.
Left and right.
Yes.
So again, to recap, as we go to the bottom half, the horizontal represents the visionary part. The vertical represents your ability to execute part, right?
Correct.
So when we're talking about visionaries and niche players, what in general are we talking about on the bottom half of the quadrant that they don't have that the people in the top half have?
Yeah, these just tend to be smaller vendors, right? So again, ability to execute is usually, number one, is Gartner being asked, an awful lot about you. Number two is how big is your sales force, how big is your marketing spend, how big is how large are your revenues, that sort of stuff. So we tend to see smaller players at the bottom half. Though I would caution you that the left side versus the right side are very different places to be. The visionaries tend to be oftentimes categorized as kind of the cool kids that don't yet have the dollars per se, and they're ripe for acquisition, that sort of stuff, because they're visionary in their strategy, but they're just not necessarily large enough yet. Whereas niche players tend to be, that's a quadrant you don't want to be in. Those are folks that neither have much vision nor have much money, and that's just not a good place.
Yet they're being ranked because it's a niche. Right, by definition?
They're being ranked because they meet the criteria to get on the quadrant, those ones that we talked about earlier. They have a certain amount of revenue, they have a certain, they're sold across, they have some features and function capabilities, but they don't necessarily, they're not usually on the rise, although it is an entry point. Some can go there and move up, but it's also sometimes a way on the way out.
Let's talk about visionaries. Now, Gartner describes visionaries in their Magic Quadrant as forward-thinking and technically focused companies. What makes them visionaries and not leaders or challengers? What are they lacking?
Right. So again, they're not leaders or challengers because of that ability to execute, which is so usually they're not large enough, right, in revenue and in sales size, et cetera. However, I think that Gartner, likes to appease them a little bit by saying that these ones are the ones who are, kind of the new and up and comers. And in some cases, that's the case. We saw an Acquia make a move from this place, and it's a stopover on your way to being a leader, right? Or it's a stopover like a FatWire on your way to being acquired. But what we also see, though, is a place where folks are sliding. If you think about it. If you think about where, you've got some in this case where they just can't, for example, get their revenues in the US. We'll talk about core media there, or we'll talk about Ektron losing traction in the market, where they kind of, based on reputation of where they've been at some point, they get some credit for being visionary, but their numbers can't possibly, keep them above that horizontal line. So there's multiple faces here.
5 companies in this category of visionaries: Episerver, Automatic, Crown Peak, a newcomer, Core Media, and Ektron. So Scott Liewehr of Digital Clarity Group, as we talk about the visionaries in that corner of the 2014 Gartner Magic Quadrant for web content management, let's start with Episerver. Why is Episerver, according to Gartner, in the visionary category here?
Yeah, so remember when this came out? Did we say that it was in October of 2014? Since then, a lot has happened for Episerver, notably that they were acquired by Excel KKR, and we commented on that, I think, believe last month. That obviously happened after this came out. I think the biggest, Episerver, is notably unmoved, unchanged from year to year, according to Gartner. And I think that's because they do actually have a pretty decent, solid strategy that's fairly similar to that of a Sitecore in terms of their capabilities, in terms of the features, functions, that sort of stuff. But they just have not gotten good traction in the US. Fairly well-reputed product over in Europe, but just have not been able to make much traction in the US, which is precisely what Excel KKR, I think, liked in them and said, look, let us take our chops that we have in being able to help companies gain traction in the US and our partner base and things like that. And so I think they want to really bolster that. So I think you will see EpiServer, in my opinion, is on the rise. This will be while they've been there for an awful long time, I think they will be increasing.
In this edition of CMS-Connected, we're discussing visionaries, that part of the 2014 Gartner Magic Quadrant for web content management. And we're talking about Automatic right now. So what do we need to know about Automatic, and why do they deserve to be considered visionaries by Gartner?
Sure. So first of all, Acquia is also one of those ones that I think they come over here from having been in the niche category before over into the visionary category. I think probably on their way up at some point as well, maybe. Automatic, if you're not familiar with them, as many are not, is the kind of commercial side of WordPress. They are the Acquia of WordPress, essentially. And I think, look, they have this VIP product, which is more services than it is product, kind of unlike Acquia has product over the Drupal thing. I think these guys are more services. They're certainly very highly rated for their ease of use as a product. WordPress is notably, we're talking about 40-fold larger than, 20-fold larger than the next largest competitor in terms of the number of websites that are on that particular platform. But certainly they pale in comparison to almost anybody else on this chart in terms of the number of enterprises that they've got, that they're catering to. Part of that is because the system itself is just, it's very simple. It doesn't handle complex scenarios. And so for me, another big challenge of the quadrant is if you look at where Automatic sits, left to right on that visionary plane, they line up almost about the same as an IBM that I just kind of praised before, which IBM handles very complex scenarios, right? Yet they're just north and south, so you'd think maybe, oh, they just don't have enough revenue. It's so different of a platform. It's not even, it's not even, doesn't even compare slightly, a little bit, which is why this two-plane kind of thing, one size fits all, it just doesn't work. Those two are not even comparable, should never be on the same list, even if an Automatic were to be acquired by, let's say, Microsoft likes, open source these days. Maybe they go and acquire them, but that suddenly wouldn't thrust them up into Liewehr's quadrant. They can't even compare in terms of the complexity of the things they can handle.
As we discuss Gartner's Magic Quadrant for 2014 for web content management on this edition of CMS Connected, we're talking about the bottom right part of the quadrant right now. We're talking about the visionaries, and one of the companies is Crown Peak, and they're new this year to the visionary category. Why, and why does Gartner say they deserve to be there?
So I'm really happy for Crown Peak that they're kind of finally on here. It's been a bid they've been trying to make for an awful long time. I think Crown Peak is a company that is a SaaS company. They're one of the very first, if not the first, SaaS-based, software as a service, subscription model-based web content management systems, which, while is very popular in other technology categories, isn't so popular in web content management. For whatever reason, not sure that I completely have my head wrapped around why that is, but it's not a very sought-after kind of delivery model in the WCM space. So they've been around for a long time, kind of slogging away. They've had a nice product. They have a very nice product. It has a lot of capabilities, but I think, frankly, they haven't gotten the traction in the market to be able to, they've only recently surpassed the kind of revenue criteria to be able to get on. That's why that was what was keeping them off before. But I frankly think, had Gartner had a model that was frankly more contemporary, where they were evaluating both open source products, which they had a very difficult time doing for a long time, and SaaS products. They don't know how to deal with subscription revenue. They were comparing just to license revenue. And so they didn't know how to look at them, frankly. But had they been able to be a little bit more visionary themselves, Gartner, I think, and had Crown Peak been on here for a longer period of time, they would have had an awful lot more traction than they do today, because product-wise, it's nice and it's great, and it's a subscription model. That's the thing that's kept them back. But I think, bravo for them on there. I think they're going to see a lot of traction. They could be ripe for an acquisition because of this. Suddenly they're viewed as a target. The subscription model we've shown 10 times customer revenue over the life of them when you're in a subscription model. So I think that's a good pick for them.
Let's talk about core media right now as we discuss the 2014 Gartner Magic Quadrant for Web Content Management on this edition of CMS-Connected. Core media is in the visionary category. Define, discuss.
Yeah, sure. So core media is it's been a nice product. It's heralded well over in Europe, but it has not made, and Gartner actually points this out, much traction in the US. It just really hasn't. And they've been here for years, but they can't seem to get off the dime in the US. There's something organizationally going on there where they're just suffocating marketing dollars over in the US or something. But it's been a nice product. The weird thing here about this is that core media is actually a fairly complex product, handles fairly complex scenarios, but they've never been a leader on this quadrant. And they tend to be selling into mid-market mostly because of their placement here, but they actually handle more complex scenarios than that. So they're a little bit of a weird one, hard to pick. I've thought for a while that they would be acquired. Hasn't really happened. I think it's because of just frankly their lack of traction. They've got a very small partner base that hurts them and certainly affects their ability to sell in the US. But overall, core media, yes, should basically be here. I think it's the right spot for them on the MQ.
In the bottom right portion of the Magic Quadrant for 2014, Gartner's Magic Quadrant for Web Content Management Industry is the visionaries. And of the 5 companies, we're talking about Ectron right now. Episerver, WordPress, Crown Peak, Core Media, and Ectron in this category of visionaries. What's the significance of Ectron being considered a visionary by Gartner?
Ectron made this is one of the ones that I said doesn't meet that criteria like you were talking about earlier, where it's not necessarily one who's kind of the cool kid that's just not wealthy enough. Ectron, we've spent some time on them as well because they were also acquired by Excel KKR, the same ones that bought Episerver, they bought Episerver. But they, I think, the challenge here with Ectron is we actually see them slide from nearly on the cusp of being, well, they actually 2 years ago, they were a leader, barely. They were over the line. Then they just fell under the line last year. And now this year they fall almost to being niche. Unfortunately, I think that that's fairly warranted in terms of the slide north to south because they've just lost a lot of traction. I see, however, that that's probably going to increase back again. I really like the strategy they have. The product I've always thought was decent, but I think, frankly, where they've fallen off is their partner base has abandoned them because they've had some real communications challenges there. But I think with some new management in place, it's fairly easily addressable. They've also got a new product strategy that I think will shift them into a subscription model and cloud that's going to really help for them. I think, however, the weird thing to me is the slide from right to left, where they're almost now over into niche. I think that's unfair of Gartner to do. I think, frankly, it's fairly two-faced of them because if you saw them just a year ago as being, more visionary, how do you suddenly see them as being less visionary when they've actually created, I think, a much stronger vision for the product than they had 2 years ago. So, while I kind of agree with their placement, it's because I didn't agree with where they were before, per se, and I was kind of outspoken about that, but I think their placement is probably right at this point.
All right, Scott, let's discuss the bottom left portion of Gartner's 2014 Magic Quadrant for Web Content Management. This is sort of the entry point into the quadrant. You got the 2 big Gartner bouncers standing there. Your name's not on the list. You got to get past those guys to get in here in the niche category, right? When we talk about the niche players in the Magic Quadrant, it's a particular segment of the market, could be size, industry, project complexity. I mean, by definition, they have a niche here, right? Explain more what the niche players are all about.
I think niche is a nice way of saying you're not doing so well, frankly, just to be speaking. Sometimes it's niche, sometimes you look at some companies that have a particular flavor or something that they speak to, but there are not that many niche products in the whole MQ, because one of the requirements they have is about, frankly, you can't be, only focus. You have to have 2 or more vertical foci. What's the plural of focus?
Not sure
focuses?
the plural of that one.
Anyway, and you have to have multiple horizontals and all that. So you can't be too niche just to even make it in the first place. I think they call it niche because it's frankly it's a nice name for it, but nobody wants to be in this quadrant, to be honest. And it can be an entry point, but it can also be an exit point.
All right, so since these are the niche players, and in fairness, we've talked about the leaders, the challengers, the visionaries. Let's give them a little less time. Let's talk about them. There are 5 companies: GX Software, Squiz, eSpirit, Telerik, who's a newcomer, and Easy Systems. GX Software.
Yeah, so GX, I actually was a real proponent of GX. I liked them. I kind of thought they were built on a framework that's very similar to the old day software and to what is now today Adobe's platform. I thought they were kind of the poor man's Adobe. I liked them a lot, but they've abandoned. They actually spun off the only kind of cool, innovative thing they had going, which was called Blue Conic, made it a different company, and frankly, abandoned for the most part their web manager product, which was their web content management. So much like a Microsoft, I'm not quite sure really why they're here. To me, they've actually not even gotten into deals that I've wanted them to get into because they abandoned web content management. So I don't know why they then want to be in this quadrant. So I don't think they should be here at all. But they actually slid, by the way, here from Visionary.
Let's talk about Squiz in the category of niche players in the 2014 Gartner Magic Quadrant for web content management. What do we need to know about Squiz being a niche player here?
I think that Squiz actually, so the niche thing about Squiz is that they don't have a very wide geographic base. They were, it's an open source based product, but run by a commercial company. They were very prevalent in Australia and have a good reputation there, own a lot of the higher ed market there. I actually think it's a fairly nice product. They bought a product called Funnelback, which is a nice search product. They've got a lot of real good capabilities. I think Gartner, again, doesn't really know how to address these open source products. They should, to me, be a visionary. They're just not that large. So I think they should be over in the visionary category in terms of if you look at their product capabilities, but they are just, I think, certainly, again, you don't see them in the market, certainly not in the US market very much, a little bit in Europe, but more in the Asia-Pac space.
eSpirit is one of the 5 companies listed by Gartner in their 2014 Magic Quadrant for web content management under the category of niche players. Talk about eSpirit.
Sure. eSpirit is a German-based company, again, trying to get some traction in the US. They've got a small base of folks. They've just hired a sales force here in the last year, actually. Product strategy for them, I really think, is to tie on to others. They've got a really solid integration story where they can integrate really well with like a Demandware product. They can integrate well with IBM products or SAP products, but they, as a standalone itself, kind of would score fairly lowly. So I actually agree with them being a niche player here too. They're not going to have high ability to execute because they are so small, but I do think, frankly, they're ripe for acquisition, even though they don't have all the features, functions, because they can add an awful lot to one of those other things, like a Demandware. They can add a content capability to a Demandware and do really well for it.
So, Scott Liewehr, there are 19 companies in the 2014 Gartner Magic Quadrant for web content management that are broken down into leaders, challengers, visionaries, and niche players. Of those 19 companies, there are only 2 newcomers.
That's right.
One was Crown Peak. The other one is Telerik.
Yeah.
Telerik is listed as one of the 5 companies under the niche players. What's significant about Telerik being a newcomer, and what do we need to know about Telerik as a niche player, according to Gartner?
So Telerik, the product that we're talking about there with Telerik is Sitefinity is the name of the product. Telerik was a product company that owned a number of products, and it itself was actually acquired in this past year. Sitefinity, I actually think, again, frankly, is more visionary than they give it credit for here. It is fairly small and it's fairly cheap as well, so it combats against others that are not on here, like a Kentico. Maybe we'll talk about them. It's a .NET product platform. Again, I think again this is an expose of Gartner's base of clients. It's not the big, huge CIOs who are calling them up, asking them about Sitefinity, but Sitefinity actually has a lot more traction, I think, in the market than is reflected here. It's just more in the mid-market and the lower side of the market than with the large kind of enterprises.
As we discussed, the niche players in Gartner's 2014 Magic Quadrant for web content management, one of the 5 companies is Easy Systems. Talk about Easy Systems.
Yeah, so Easy Systems stays in the visionary, in the niche category here as well. Easy Systems, another open source, commercial open source product. I actually think, again, visionary, completeness of vision-wise, they've got an awful lot of pieces, certainly more than an Acquia does. They've got marketing automation capabilities, they've got analytics capabilities, they've got an awful lot as a part of that product suite, but I don't think that they've really got much of anything in the way of how they're getting out to market, in the way of their sales force. It's really kludgy. They depend on partners, but their partner base and folks is fairly small. So while open source, they don't have a whole lot of contributions from the community per se, and so it's really a small core group of folks who are going and building them and trying to get it out there. I think I agree with niche, because of that, but in terms of completeness of vision, I think they're further along than many give them credit for.
All right, Scott, to finish up this edition of CMS Connected, let's talk about, we've discussed the 19 companies that are on Gartner's 2014 Magic Quadrant. Yep. You mentioned that there are a handful, 40, 50 companies that were close to getting in.
Sure.
Let's talk about a handful of those companies. Kentico, Hippo, Magnolia, Bridgeline, DNN, and T4. Let's start with Kentico as a notable vendor who's not on Gartner's Magic Quadrant yet. Are they knocking on the door?
Yeah, they don't make it on, and I'm not exactly sure of all the reasons. They don't publicly talk about how much revenue they have. They don't, so I don't know what were the criteria they missed. I'd imagine it's revenue. But they certainly have great presence in Europe. They have great presence. They're Prague-based, in Czechoslovakian-based company, Czech Republic, sorry. But they've got good traction in the U.S. Again, though, mid-market, kind of per domain, they cost $15,000 or something. So they're much on the far smaller end. So that's why they're not going to have the revenues that some of these other products are. But here they are fighting tooth and nail every single day against a Sitecore, another .NET leader. They're out there in an awful lot of deals on an awful lot of short lists, and for them not to make consideration by many is, again, a reflection, number one, that Gartner says, while we want the picture of this MQ to get all over the place and plastered and be used by many, ultimately it caters to the Fortune 2000 or Fortune 1000, which are their customer base, who are not probably out there considering a Kentico.
Quick comment on Hippo. Let's discuss them. Of all the companies that are not on the Magic Quadrant, but vying to get in. What's notable about Hippo?
I listed Hippo that I wanted to talk about them quickly because I think that they're one that folks should be considering. If you're looking at some of those more complex systems, you're looking at a Java-based system, Hippo is open source. It's a commercial open source product, not a kind of huge contributed by the community one, but one guided that you can kind of take a look at their roadmap and either like it or dislike it. But I think you'll like what you see in terms of their visionary capabilities. The technological expertise behind this product is second to none. I mean, it really is quite a capable product and really well built and well put together. And they've kind of shifted from being just, they were originally kind of just a web content management platform and wanted to do nothing else, to now kind of really taking on more of the digital marketing capabilities, more personalization capabilities, and things like that I think pit them against many of the heavyweights. But again, revenue-wise, they're just not going to be there. But they're making a big entry into the U.S. and I think getting some good partners. And they could really chip into the Adobe partner base if they go and convince them, look, you could use some of your folks to do this work, make a lot more margin for yourself. Could be interesting play.
Scott, in your opinion, Magnolia is one of the noteworthy companies not on the Magic Quadrant worth talking about. What's noteworthy about Magnolia?
Many of the same reasons when I mentioned Hippo, that, again, a Java open source, commercial open source product, really smart people building that product. I really like it. I especially like it because in this mobile omni-channel world that we're in, they were actually the very first one that truly came out of the gate where they shifted their whole user experience. I'm not talking about mobile for the front end, like the website user audience part. I'm talking about your user base, that you're contributing and editing content on your mobile device like nobody else was doing before. Really innovative in that way, so I really think that they would be far over in the visionary from that stance. They don't have, though, all the marketing automation, some of those things, but if you're looking for a good, solid web content management play, I think they're one that's worthwhile to look at.
Let's talk about Bridgeline right now. We're discussing on this edition of CMS Connected the Gartner Magic Quadrant for 2014 for web content management. Bridgeline is one of the companies that you say is notable or worth discussing that's not on the quadrant.
Yeah.
Why?
I say that because Bridgeline, to me, if you look at the product, it's a .NET product, very suite-based. They've got 5 parts of their suite with the social and market, what they call Marketeer, which is marketing automation, the web content management, commerce as well. From the beginning, so they've got a lot of these capabilities that they've had from day one in the analytics, the last one. They've got a lot of these capabilities that they've had from day one, work really well together, but because of their strategy that they actually grew not by acquiring other product companies, but by acquiring agencies. So they basically don't have a partner base that's out there pushing them to a whole lot of deals. They instead have decided, we want agencies, we're going to hire and we're going to grow our professional services team, and only they, for the most part, are the ones out there implementing them. I think they don't make the cut for a couple of reasons. One, most specifically and notably, is that they don't have much presence outside of the US whatsoever because of the reason that I just stated. So I think they're looking in their next year to go make traction with other partners and kind of for the first time start to have a partner model over in Europe and things like that. I think it's a good product to go and look at. Challenge, and a caveat though, is that they are public, which I think they regret at this point, as their, I think their stock price is fairly low today. They're a penny stock, and so that scares away a number of CFOs. Product is nice though, but it's scary for some.
DNN, in your opinion, as we discuss notable companies that aren't on Gartner's Magic Quadrant for WCM for 2014, DNN is one of the companies you want to talk about. What do you want to talk about with that?
I list DNN because I think, if you're going to talk about some of the other, DNN is another open source, commercial open source, but far more contributed by the community than like a Magnolia or a Hippo, like I mentioned. DNN is, far more community driven, but it's actually now they've kind of changed. They've moved from being called .NET Nuke to actually now DNN, where they are much more in control of their own destiny and guiding their own roadmap. But they are a .NET version of an open source product that I think if you're going to look, if you're open to open source and you're looking .NET, then I think they're a nice happy medium where they're one of the very few that are .NET, that you might have the talent and capabilities, but you want the mentality of an open source product and the ability to kind of look to the community for plugins and capabilities like that. I think it's a nice one to look at.
And T4, what do we need to know about T4 as a notable company that's not on Gartner's Magic Quadrant, but might be getting in there someday?
Sure, T4 is short for Terminal 4. They definitely would be niche because they really own, they're very popular, especially over in Europe, but also in the US in the higher ed market. I just like the product from the standpoint of what it does. The challenge is they're not really very far. They've done really well in that particular vertical because they've really catered to it. I think if their strategy were to include expanding into some other verticals, then you'd find, because people who are on Terminal 4 really like it a lot. It really does a lot of things that others just can't compete with in terms of scaling, in terms of, think about a higher ed model. You're talking about lots of multi-site management. You're talking about complex administration abilities. So it's a great product.
All right, so as we wrap up this edition of CMS Connected, I have a final question for you. Biggest winners, in your opinion, of the 19 companies on this year's 2014 Gartner Magic Quadrant for web content management. Who's the biggest winner, or who are the biggest winners? What comes to mind when I say that to you?
Yeah. I think Acquia is probably the biggest winner because they came up from visionary to leader so high. And so I think that's going to significantly affect the number of shortlists that they're considered on, because they were already kind of a cool kid before, but now they're a cool kid that has the CYA backing of a Gartner MQ to make it kind of okay to look at them. So I think that they will benefit the most from this year's MQ. I think that IBM won't benefit nearly as much because they're going to have their customer base and they're going to have whatever, but I actually think it should be a nice back padding for them to see that they move over kind of finally again from 6 years ago from the Challengers Quadrant over into the Visionary Quadrant, because they are doing a good job putting their vision together, but they won't see nearly the traction that an Acquia will because of this.
Great stuff, Scott.
Good, man. This was fun.
All right, that's all the time we have for this edition of CMS Connected. I want to encourage you to join us for the next edition of CMS Connected. It'll come your way on Thursday, February 26th, and on that show, we're going to be talking about who's driving the e-commerce bus in 2015. Before we go, I'd like to thank our lead sponsors. Of course, that is Falcon Software and Digital Clarity Group. Falcon Software, locations across North America. Falcon Software is a full-service digital agency. It's been providing web design, content management, e-commerce, social, mobile, and digital marketing solutions for over 21 years. And Scott Liewehr and Digital Clarity Group, listed as the #5 global industry analyst firm by Influencer Relations.
Yeah.
Number 5.
These are the analysts of the analysts, and that's what they say, so I'll take it.
Congrats, my friend.
Thanks, man.
All
Appreciate
right,
it.
that'll do it for this edition of CMS Connected. So get connected
And stay connected.
with CMS Connected. We'll see you next time.